This video you're about to watch is me sharing the whole story of my experience within children's social care and what led to my research project. So it's a bit of a journey, but I think it all starts with my granddad. I didn't really know him that well, but I've recently found out that he was in care. And nowadays, we know a lot more about things like epigenetics and intergenerational trauma, so how experiences carry through generations. So in a way, I think that's where my care experience kind of starts. The story really picks up with my parents, and that's because they've dedicated their lives to caring for children in care. But they sort of met in Lancaster, and my dad was progressing his own career in children's social care. And my mum was inspired by him. That eventually led to her doing a social work degree. During that time, they also fostered children. 2 of those children are still in our lives today. This world of children's social care has been a part of my life from the start. But I guess one of the most defining moments of my childhood was when I was just a baby. My mum had got called in to cover a shift at work, and she had to bring me along for various reasons, but back then that was sort of a normal thing to do. So she put me to bed in my cot, introduced the other children to me, and sort of went off looking after them. But what happened was that this new child which had just moved in, who was clearly struggling from her own traumatic childhood experiences, somehow managed to get into my crib and attacked me. It was serious enough that I ended up in hospital, and obviously that's a really traumatic thing to go through. And I think it shaped me as a person in many different ways. But most importantly, I think, is the fact that no one blamed the child. And I think that really reflects how we, at that time, understood that, kids act out in these ways because of their own hurt and their own experiences. Throughout my childhood, my parents working in care has taken me from place to place to place. At one point, we lived on the grounds of a large children's home in Salford, but basically it was more like a community than it was a children's home, in the sense that we all just shared our day-to-day lives with each other, and I never really noticed that there was anything unusual about that. After the children's home in Salford, my parents ran a pub for a bit, but basically I grew up in the care environment. It wasn't really just a job for my parents, it was a way of life. After the pub, we moved to a new town, and at that time, leaving care services were a lot different to how they are now. Children were leaving children's homes and foster care and being accommodated in sort of bed and breakfast type accommodation. So to sort of counter that, my mum decided to turn our family home into a supported accommodation project for young people leaving the care system. And I think it was the first of its kind around that time. And the good thing about that was that there was always someone there if they needed someone. So they could always come and visit, but they had their own space and their own safety. I really struggled in school, and that resulted in me leaving with barely any GCSEs and a serious case of low self-esteem. And I just didn't really have anything to aspire to. But when I became 18, I got a job as a youth mentor, and it was that job for children in care that actually gave me something to care about. Through that job, that's where I started to really see how kids' experiences of trauma affected them. And I just started to get curious about it all and wanted to understand how kids' experiences impact them long term. I started taking psychology courses with the Open University, purely just out of interest. One course led to another, and before I knew it, I was doing a degree. And my dissertation for my degree looked at, what factors promote secure attachments in children's homes. And it was that really pushed me deeper into research about care experience. And since then, all my research has been focused on how we can improve care for future generations. I did my master's, which has ultimately led me to where I am now. I saw a job offer at Liverpool University for a funded PhD programme. That's how I ended up doing my PhD at Liverpool. and I'm focusing on how care experience influences children's mental health outcomes with the aim of identifying what care does well and bring a light on what needs changing. So our first study was all about finding out what it's like to be in care, because no one's ever really asked that before, at least not in the way we're doing it. So we started that by doing interviews, asking people who've been in care to reflect on their experiences. And we used something called the Assessment Framework for Children in Need and their families to guide the conversations. And one thing we focused on was mental health, because I think mental health is the foundation for success in all areas of life. So that felt like the right place to start. And we found some really interesting things, both positive and negative things, about how care affects mental health. So the next step is to turn those findings into a questionnaire that will help us understand how these experiences affect mental health long term. So if you're interested in taking part, there's a link in the description that'll take you to more information about the study. And if that's not for you, that's all right, but please share the video or any posts about the research with anyone who you think might want to take part.